والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Y'all hear me okay? You guys hear me okay? Can you hear me okay now? Alright, we'll just be loud, inshallah. So, Jazakallah khair for coming out. Jazakallah khair for coming out to another week of the beloved to the beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Today we're talking about Aisha radiallahu anha, who is obviously the wife of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so this is an important conversation for us to have because I think many of us heard obviously all the beautiful stories of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Aisha, but we're focusing on one key thing here, right? We're focusing on how did she love the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and how do we incorporate that? What lessons can we take away from that to apply in our own lives? The way that we applied it for Khadija, right? The way that we applied it for Fatima, the way that we applied it for Zayd. So this is just another installment of that, inshallah. So we have our brother here, Abdurrahman. He wouldn't like it if I praised him to his face, so I did that last week instead at the end. So I saved you that. But Jazakallah khair for coming out, of course. And so we're just going to go right into it, inshallah. Aisha was of the ones who carried on, as you're going to mention, the legacy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It says, some scholars say that 1/4 of the Sharia comes from this one human being, that is Aisha. So this is very important for us to learn about and to apply in our daily life, inshallah. So just to get started, inshallah, what is the origin of Aisha? What is her background? Who is Aisha that we know today?
بسم الله الحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. Let's start with who Aisha radiallahu anha is. Aisha radiallahu anha is first and foremost the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, whose full name, Aisha radiallahu anha's full name would be bint Abi Bakr bint Abi Qahafa Uthman ibn Amr bin Amr bin Ka'b bin Sa'ad bin Taym bin Murrah bin Ka'b bin Lu'ay al-Qurayshi al-Tamiyya al-Makkiyya Nabawiyya al-Mu'mineen Zawjat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The scholars call her Afqah al-Nisa al-Ummah al-Itlaq. She is with no doubt, the most knowledgeable woman in the Ummah. She was born in Mecca approximately 4 years after the Dawah started. So this is, as we all know, when the Dawah started in Mecca, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is one of the first Muslims to accept Islam, and the Dawah originally was the hidden Dawah. It wasn't out in the open. So it's important to know that she's born in those early years when the Dawah was not yet to the public. Her mother is Ruman, the daughter of Amr ibn Uwayma bin Abd Shams ibn Attab bin al-Kinani. Her parents were Muslims from the beginning of Islam. This is important to note because when she was born, something important comes up, and we'll discuss this later, but she was engaged at a very young age. As is the practice of the Arabs, she was engaged to the son of Al-Mut'im ibn Ali. Al-Mut'im was not a Muslim, and he did not know at that point that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was a Muslim, because Islam had not been out in the open. When he finds out that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is from the people of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he breaks off this engagement. This is important when we discuss other things. So at that point, after the breaking off of this engagement, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sees in a dream a revelation that tells him that that points him into the direction of marrying the daughter of his best friend, Aisha. And from there, he approaches Abu Bakr Siddiq, and he explains to him his dream, he explains to him that he's interested in marriage, and early in her life, the scholars say, and the hadith, 26 years old, she was contracted for marriage. This was after the death of Khadija, radiallahu anha, and this is approximately a few months before the Hijrah. They are married, and she moves into the home of the Prophet ﷺ after Al-Badr, which is 2 years after the Hijrah. At this point, we have, most of us who live in this country have come across the issue of explaining how did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ marry someone so young, and how was he engaged to someone who was, as the reports say, 6 years old. Right? Is there anyone that doesn't know this conflict, that never come across this? I'm pretty sure everyone has come across that this becomes an issue. Let's discuss this first, and then we'll discuss other things. Firstly, the person that she was engaged to prior, his name was Jubair ibn Mut'im. Majority of scholars will assume he's the son of Mut'im. Mut'im had multiple sons, but he is the one that seems like it's him that she was engaged to. He was in his 30s when she was born. So the point at the Prophet ﷺ is saying, he is marrying some, it's the tradition of the Arabs at the time that when a child was born, they were already designated for a particular person. That doesn't mean the actual married life of living together occurs before puberty. This is just something, I think, we have some kids in the room, just to keep it halal, right, and above, PG-13. It should be noted that nothing in married life starts before puberty. That's when things start. So the assumption that many Islamophobes make that she was too young, or the Prophet had some ill intent, or astaghfirullah, anything like that, it's easily refutable by the practice of the Arabs. We have other accounts of companions, them and the father companion and his child being 10 to 12 years apart. So it is not something that is child, or today's child, young person marriage was not something that was completely foreign to the Arabs at the time.
Yeah, I think one thing that we can also use as kind of an argument, not that we need to argue or justify or have to apologize for our religion at all, but one of these things that we can bring up is the fact that who did Aisha turn out to be, right? She was not, if the argument, and I don't even want to utter the words that I'm trying to mention, but if the argument is that she was taken advantage of, if the argument is that she was, forced into this, whatever the case is, would she grow up to be the confident woman that she ended up being? How many times do we hear about these situations that happen still to this world today, of children who were abused at young ages? How do they end up being like in later years, right? They suffer with depression and all these types of things. Aisha was the exact opposite. We have narrations of Aisha disagreeing with the companions, some of the best companions, on 50 rulings or what the Prophet ﷺ did. So this is another way to kind of to combat that.
Okay, so let's we've established that they're married. They have in Medina, they're now living together. Aisha radiallahu anha lived with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for approximately 8.5 years. In those 8.5 years, she became the most knowledgeable person in Medina. It is reported by Abdullah ibn Zubair, who is her nephew, that she was the most knowledgeable in the Quran, the most knowledgeable in Hadith, and the most knowledgeable in medicine in Medina when she was after the life of the Prophet. That's who the authority was, who people went to. And so the question is, if this person is forced into this situation, would they have absorbed this much information? Because there's other companions there. The Prophet has other wives, right? She's not the only wife. And with all of this, in this 8.5 year period, she knows more than everyone else. On top of that, the medicine one is interesting. I don't know. Did you know that? Medicine, the Aisha was more knowledgeable in medicine than anyone else in the world. The reason was the Prophet ﷺ was the guide for everything. So people would come to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him about medicinal things. I have this cut, I have this wound, I have this pain. What should I do? And she is a sponge. She absorbed everything. And she would then, after the life of the Prophet ﷺ, convey the knowledge that he would give for others ﷺ, about medicine to other people. She became the authority in so many different things that she was a leader in most aspects of society. We find that even after, much later in her later life, like we studied history, she was also a military general. She's done everything, right? She was the leader of the Ummah. And she never, ever, you'll never find a hadith, you'll never find a report, you'll never find even the assumption that she had a negative connotation about a single moment with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So, let's move further and let's talk about more things about what she did in her life with the Prophet ﷺ. Firstly, she was the only wife of the Prophet ﷺ that knew no other man. Whereas the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ had other husbands before the Prophet ﷺ, widows, some of them were divorced. Aisha knew no other. You understand what I'm saying, right? Come to understand. She was keen on memorizing, keen on learning as much as she could. We will find that there are 2,210 hadith at least that she narrates directly from the Prophet Muhammad. These are not hadith where she heard from someone else. She heard from her husband. And she says that I heard from the Prophet. Whereas you'll find, if you do enough reading, you'll find that, for example, Abu Hurairah will point out other companions that said things that the Prophet said, or Abdullah ibn Umar, or Anas ibn Malik, or the other, so the four big narrators is Abu Hurairah, Abdullah ibn Umar, Anas ibn Malik, and then you have Aisha in terms of the most, they call them the Muqtareen, the people that narrate the most from the Prophet. And the other three, you'll find they narrated from Umar, they narrated from Abu Bakr, they narrated from other companions. Aisha had unlimited access, basically. This was her husband. She would see things and she would tell you, I saw from the Prophet. She became the most knowledgeable person. So we move forward later on into life, and we have outside the Prophet, she is also a narrator of the hadith in the life of Umar, of Fatima, of Sa'ad, of Hamza, and her father, Abu Bakr Siddiq. She is a narrator of their lives. So when you see biographies, she's one of the key historians. She knows things other than just the Prophet. She wasn't just observing her husband and not observing what else was happening in society. She was, she still is, main authority in hadith. One of the big authorities in Quran, in terms of recitation, in terms of tafsir, in terms of social things, particularly women's issues. There's many issues we only have the answers because she asked the question, and people ask her the question. That's how we have the answers to many of the issues that our sisters have, that brothers, they're looking at me, you guys don't have positions, right? She is the reason we have these answers. She was a wife, she was a daughter, she was the mother of the believers, she was an aunt. Who knows what her kunya was? What was the kunya of Aisha Abdurrahman? Keep going. Abdullah. Why? She never had kids. Her nephew. Her nephew, Abdullah ibn Jubair, Abdullah ibn Zubair, is her nephew from, who's his mother? Asma. He's also the one who buried her. He's also the one who spent the most amount of time with her. She was the key muftiya, the one who gave fatwa after the life of the Prophet. And most importantly, she was the most beloved to the Prophet. The Prophet was asked, who is the most beloved to you? And he said, Aisha. Then who? Her father. And then who? And then he went to the rest of the companions. The name of the series is what? The most beloved is Aisha radiallahu anha.
Yeah, I think mashallah, beautifully said. I think there's just, in terms of her qualities, I think something should be mentioned that she was just like her father in many qualities as well. Her love for camels, a fondness for camels, like Abu Bakr had a fondness for camels. She loved poetry as well as Abu Bakr did. She studied ancestry and tribes the way that Abu Bakr did. And she had pretty much the natural qualities of her father. Her nicknames, of the nicknames, was Habibatu Habibullah, which is, like you mentioned, the beloved one of Allah. As-Sadiqa bint As-Sadiq, obviously she's the daughter of As-Sadiq. And there's another meaning reddish complexion. Humera, I believe, is a reddish complexion, because that was what she would look like if she were to get shy or angry. Her reddish complexion would show. There's a hadith. I mean, we mentioned this a bunch of times that Rasulullah said that there were 4 women who perfected their faith, right? And we said there was Khadija, Fatima, Asiya, and Maryam. Those were the 4. But the Prophet also says, and the superiority of Aisha is, after that, it's like a dish called farid, right? Which is like a delicacy, like it's just like this thing that the Arabs love to eat. So it was like the best dish of all. That's how the Prophet kind of identified that. So I think at that point, we've talked about, her marriage to the Prophet. We talked about how to dispel these Islamophobes, which, by the way, this argument only came about recently. This is not something that for the last 1400 years was a common argument against the Prophet anyway. This is only a very Western, modern argument by Islamophobes. I think we also should mention that the Arabs, the biggest enemies of Islam during the time, did not have any problem with this marriage, right? No one called to question why is he engaged to a 6-year-old. No one said that at the time, and even if they were the biggest enemies of Islam, no one had an issue with that. So that's always something for us to think about. Why all of a sudden in today's society is that a problem? And I think it shows that as Muslims we should be unapologetically Muslim. We don't, at the same time, we don't have to debate and try to disprove and have these arguments with people who most of the time they don't have any interest in finding out the truth. Most of the time it's just people who want to insult Islam to make Islam look bad, who are against Islam, right? So that just, hopefully that was beneficial, that segment there. You mentioned obviously the hadith of the Prophet about who his favorite person was, and he said Aisha. Are there any other stories you'd like to recollect with regards to that?
So, the Prophet would allocate time between all of his wives. He had many wives, and to be fair, with equality, everyone gets time with the Prophet. Some of the wives of the Prophet would give up their time to give to Aisha because they knew he loved her more. So they would give up their time for her so that he would be happy. So the Prophet would drink from the vessel he would drink, and she would drink. They would drink from the same place, just because to get closer. Barakah, thank you. For the barakah of drinking from the same place. If she ate from a piece of meat, he would eat from the same piece of meat from the same place for the barakah. He mentioned the Humayra. She would blush a lot, radiallahu anha. And she was of pale skin, but had red and pinkish cheeks. So every time he would do something, she would blush. So he would call her Humayra because of the blushing. Similarly, the Prophet there's a hadith of the Prophet where a companion asks him about the qualities to look for a wife. And he said, if you marry someone younger, you can play with them. The Prophet used to play with his wife. They used to race. The Prophet there was a group of people that came from Abyssinia. The Prophet carried his wife on his back to bring her there, just so she could observe. And imagine today someone carrying their wife to observe anything, right? The Prophet loved his wife so much. But all in all, the Prophet he put the best effort he could with all of his wives. Aisha particularly was known to be his favorite. And that's, I think, the summation. When the Prophet ﷺ has you as your favorite, it's above everyone else. One part that we should discuss, I think, the ifk.
Yeah, so we'll get there inshallah. Let me just drop two stories, because there's endless amount of stories with Aisha and the Prophet ﷺ. There's just an endless amount in terms of just what you can talk about, what you can bring up. One thing that I found very interesting is there's a very long hadith where Aisha comes home to the Prophet ﷺ and she tells him about this conversation that 11 women were having. Right? 11 women were having this conversation about their husbands. That was kind of I'm TLDR in the hadith here because it's a very long hadith. But the fact that one thing is Aisha is able to recall this hadith way after the fact. She's able to recall this conversation way after the fact. This entire conversation she's narrating to Rasulullah ﷺ. And the entire time Rasulullah ﷺ is listening and he's understanding everything that she's saying. You know, I think, I don't want to speak too much, but like, in terms of couples today, maybe at some point, men might zone out, right? Men might feel like, you know, all right, I had enough of this conversation. But Rasulullah ﷺ was not like that, right? Rasulullah ﷺ listened attentively, and Aisha begins to tell him about a woman named Zar. And so Zar is talking about how amazing her husband is until her husband leaves her for someone else. This is a summation of the hadith, okay? And the Prophet is listening to the entire conversation, and he tells Aisha, I am to you like Abu Zar was to Zar, except I would never leave you. Right? So like at the end of the conversation, he kind of ties it all together, and shows that he was listening to every single word. Another hadith in Prophet was, there was a Persian neighbor of the Prophet who invited him over for soup. And he asked if he could bring Aisha, and the Persian neighbor says, no, just you, and he does not come the first day. He asked, the Persian neighbor asks again, can I bring you over for some soup? Rasulullah says, can I bring Aisha? The Persian neighbor says, no, just you. And Rasulullah does not take him up on the invite the second time. The third time, I think the Persian neighbor gets the memo that Rasulullah was only going to come if he can bring his wife. And then, after that, they went. And then one last thing I'll say before we get to a very important topic. The Prophet ﷺ knew when Aisha was married. The Prophet ﷺ knew when Aisha was married. And this shows the emotional intelligence of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He spends his days serving, everyone in the community. And he still has the wherewithal to understand and to have emotional intelligence. I think, I can't say we, but like, many brothers that I know, they come home and they just kind of clock out, right? They clock out, they spend a lot of their time just by themselves, or they don't listen to their significant others. The Prophet says he knew when Aisha, when she was mad at him, because she would swear by the Lord of Ibrahim when she was mad, right? And if she was happy with him, then she would swear by the Lord of Muhammad. So this is just kind of the story element of it. There's a lots of stories we can talk about, but I think that should suffice, inshallah. Next, I want to kind of get into a very important topic, and it may be something that you guys have, maybe for the youth here, maybe you've never heard of, but it is the slander of Aisha by the hypocrites. So I'd like to just kind of get into it and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so it's called al-ifk. That's the word in the Quran for this incident. So, after the battle of Bani al-Mustaliq, Rasulullah was coming back with the companions and Aisha anha. Back then, the women would travel in a little box type of thing. It was covered to prevent, obviously, them being exposed to the world. So there's a little box that they would carry along with the rest of the caravan. So in this, Aisha she notices that the army has stopped on their way back to Medina, and nature calls. So she steps out of her chamber, and she goes to answer the call of nature. And on her way back, she notices she has dropped her necklace. And this necklace was dear to her. And she dropped the necklace and she starts looking, and she can't seem to find the necklace. And the people did not notice that she had left her chamber, and they lift up the box, the honga, I don't know what else you call it, the little carriage. They lift up the carriage and they keep walking, and they forget her in the middle of the desert. And then she finds the necklace. But she thinks, let me go back to where the army was, and I'll sit there and wait. Someone's bound to notice that she's missing, and they will come back. While she's sitting there, she falls asleep. And from a distance, one of the companions was trailing. He had fallen asleep. He, with his bride, was behind the army because he didn't wake up in time. So he sees that there's someone laying in the desert. And he goes up to her and he sees that this is Aisha radiallahu anha. And he essentially picks her up and brings her back to Medina. Aisha radiallahu anha, when she narrates this story, she says, Wallahi, I did not speak to him in that ride. That whole trip, they get back to Medina. And when they get back to Medina, she falls ill because of the journey. This is the desert, multi-day trip. She gets home, she has no idea what's happening, and she's sick for about a month. Within this month, rumors start to spread from the hypocrites. Can someone name who the hypocrites are? Does anyone know? A particular person. Who is the big hypocrite in Medina? Which ain't loud. Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. He is the king of the hypocrites. And he starts spreading this rumor. That Aisha radiallahu anha and the companion Safwan al-Mu'addab had some sort of relationship. That's why they came later. So this story spreads amongst Medina, and she, radiallahu anha, is sick. She does not know what's happening. So one night, when she goes back in the day, you had to leave your home, go out into the wilderness to use the bathroom. One of the women of Medina tell her that these are the rumors that are being spread about you. And she takes this very harshly because she has no idea. She's been sick for a few weeks and she thought nothing of it. So she comes back to the home of the Prophet ﷺ and she tells the Prophet ﷺ, I would like to go stay with my parents. So she goes and stays with her parents. And in the meantime, all of Medina is now spreading rumors that she has left her house. You can imagine all of the gossiping and everything's happening. And she's at the home of her mother, and her mother tells her what the people have been saying. She gets the story, and she can't sleep. She's in distress. She's stressed, she has anxiety, she's unable to sleep. She says, I was not able to sleep at night. She's with her mother. At the same time, the Prophet ﷺ also does not know what's happening because he wasn't there. So he starts questioning the people that would know better. So the people of his household. For example, he spoke to Ali ibn Abi Talib, he spoke to Usama bin Zayd, and he asks them, have you heard of anything? Have you come across anything that would point to this story? Have you heard? Trying to get some information. Then he asks, the slave of Aisha radiallahu anha, her servant, if there was any information shared, any inkling, anything. And she said, I've never known her to be anything other than a Siddiqa bint Siddiq. She's the most truthful, the daughter of the truthful. So because of this, the Prophet ﷺ is now himself experiencing this. He's feeling the effects of these rumors and this gossip. So he finally goes to Aisha radiallahu anha and he tells her, he says, if you are telling the truth, if you are innocent, Allah will reveal your innocence. And if you are sinful, seek forgiveness of Allah, and Allah will forgive your sins. When Aisha radiallahu anha hears this, in her own words, she says that she doesn't feel the need to cry anymore. The sadness is gone. It's reaffirmed in her heart that Allah is always with her. The same way when the Prophet ﷺ returned from the cave of Hira the first time, and he told his wife Khadija that he had so and so happen to him, and he sees all of this, and he tells her to cover him. And what did she say? Allah would not leave you. He would not abandon you. The same thing, Rasulullah, the same thing, he essentially says to Aisha, which is, if you're truthful, if you are innocent, Allah will make your innocence apparent. It won't be hidden. It will come out. Aisha, in her emotion, again, we should understand that she's still young. If we did the math, she was with the Prophet for 8 years, but this is somewhere in her teenage years, and she says, I don't know what to say. So she turns to her father and she says, can you tell the Prophet what's in my heart? And he says, I can't speak to the Prophet. He turns to her mother and says, can you tell the Prophet what's in my heart? She said, I cannot speak to the Prophet. So she says to the Prophet, the only thing that comes to my mind is what Yaqub alayhi salam said when Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was told Yusuf alayhi salam had been eaten by the wolves, which is Sabrun Jameel. Allahul Musta'anu ala ma tasifun. Allah, first off, patience is what befits the scenario, the situation. And Allah is the one who you seek assistance with against what has been described to you. When this occurs, she decides, I'm done with this conversation, I'm going to turn the other way. In her heart, she's like, Allah will take care of this. And at that moment, revelation is revealed without anyone discussing it. The Prophet gets revelation in which, I'm going to read the ayah, the translation, so for expedition purposes. It's Surah An-Nur, the 11th to 20th ayah. Where Allah says, indeed those who come up with the outrageous slander are a group of you. Do not think this is bad for you. Referring to Aisha. Rather, it is good for you. They will be punished, each according to their share of the sin. And as for their mastermind, he will suffer tremendous punishment. If only the believing men and women had thought well of one another when they heard these rumors and said, this is clearly an outrageous slander. The word is al-ifk. Why did they not produce 4 witnesses? Since they have failed to produce 4 witnesses, they are truly liars in the sight of Allah. Had it not been for Allah's grace and mercy upon you in this world and the Akhirah, you would have certainly been touched with a tremendous punishment from what you plunged into. When you passed it from one tongue to another and said with your mouth what you had no knowledge of, taking it lightly while it was extremely serious in the light of Allah, if only you had, upon hearing, said, how can we speak about such a thing? Glory be to Allah, this is a heinous slander. Allah forbids you from ever doing something like this again, if you are true believers. And Allah makes His commandments clear to you, for Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. Indeed, those who love to see indecency spread amongst the believers will suffer a painful punishment in this life and the hereafter. Allah knows, and you do not know. You would have suffered had it not been for the mercy of Allah, and had Allah not been ever gracious, ever merciful. When she hears this, she's filled with joy. And she says, in her own words in the hadith, she says that I would never have imagined that Allah would reveal ayat regarding my affair. She thought that maybe the Prophet would get some communication through a dream, or an angel would come and tell him that she was innocent. But Allah basically certifies that she is innocent. She is free of any of the wrongdoings, and we also get the standard practice from this, that Allah tells us, when you hear rumors, you have to verify it. It's not just, I heard something on the pass it along, right? This is something we can all apply to our lives. If we hear things we hear on the news, doesn't mean it's true, right? Verify. The Prophet said, when Husn Islam al-Mar'i, taraku ma la ya'ni. From the perfection of one's Islam is to leave what doesn't concern them. Don't spread rumors, right? It's one of the big lessons we can get from this. Another big lesson is that trusting in Allah, the same way the Prophet trusted in Allah when he first got the wahi, is the same thing he told Aisha. Allah will not leave you. If you are truthful, if you are free from wrongdoing, Allah will always make it evident that you are innocent. So don't hesitate. Don't think. Don't second guess the tawakkul, the trust you should be having on Allah. And that's the biggest thing we can correct. One is that don't slander people. You have to have knowledge. You should have witnesses. And other than that, tawakkul will get you to places you could never imagine. Aisha radiallahu anha will forever, until the end of time, be attached to the Quran. Because her story is in the Quran. Whereas all of those other people that were spreading the gospel, their punishment is now guaranteed in the Quran. And forever, till the end of time, their punishment is guaranteed. So, we see that her honesty, her innocence, is something that Allah made it so important for the Ummah that it's something that even to this day, we're still discussing this topic. When we read Surah Al-Nur, it's something that we come across every time. And the person who made up this rumor, it could have been light, as Allah said, it was thought to be light, but to Allah it was heavy. And with this, Allah guarantees their destruction.
Yes, Allah, I think the lessons there, as Abdurrahman mentioned, it's like verify things before you spread them, right? Secondly, firstly, don't spread things to begin with. Don't, just like avoid putting that sin upon yourself, right? And the seriousness and the just magnitude of slander, right? Especially in today's world, it's very, very easy to slander somebody even without, it literally takes a few seconds to slander somebody in today's world with social media. Imagine how much sin can be incurred in the matter of seconds on social media by spreading something that's not true, or retweeting or reposting or resharing something that's that's incorrect. It's a lesson for us all, really. SubhanAllah. It's only gotten worse for us, I think, in terms of how to avoid slander and issues like this. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. And I think you all can kind of notice that the theme of this halaqah, because Aisha's life is a halaqah in and of itself. Like we did not even talk about a fraction of her life today. And then the reality, we had to do it this way because there's like no way we could have covered everything in the time that we have allotted. But what I really want you guys to take away from this is just the legacy that she built. Her legacy will stand the test of time, and that's something that we can work on ourselves in terms of loving the Prophet more. How many students did Aisha have, right? Hundreds of students, right? How many, how much do we learn about the Prophet through Aisha? That's something that we can empower ourselves to do as Muslims. How many more people can we teach, about the Prophet Muhammad? How many more people can we educate about the Prophet Muhammad? His life, his words, his mannerisms, his characteristics, right? I think beyond just a dawah element, but on a deeper level, how much do we know about the Prophet, how much do we actually speak about the Prophet? How much do we actually convey about the Prophet Muhammad? So I think for constraints of time, we're going to stop there. But we do have the kahoots as per tradition, like every week. We have a book as a prize for whoever wins, inshallah. The book is on the mothers of the believers. It'd be really bad if the brothers won again for the third straight week. So let's